They assigned her to logistics. Now her name's a forbidden word in Hive culture. The transport ship Spearhead 17 cut through the void like a silver needle, its hull scarred by 17 different battles. Inside, beings from across the galaxy sat in uncomfortable silence. Zorian warriors checking plasma rifles. Lithari psychic operatives meditating in formation, their translucent forms flickering as they prepared mental defenses against enemies that fought with nightmares made manifest. In the corner forgotten among these legends of intergalactic warfare sat Captain Emily Raines, 29 years old human and completely unsuited for actual combat. Her uniform bore the Logistics Corps' insignia, marking her as support personnel in a war where support was often first to die and last to be remembered. She clutched a worn datapad containing supply manifests, the mundane mathematics of keeping an army fed while the universe burned. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had graduated top of her class from Earth's Strategic Academy, studying interspecies warfare, and writing her thesis on hive mind psychological vulnerabilities. But theory meant nothing when you stood 5'6" in a galaxy where warriors topped 7 feet and could bench press hover tanks. The assignment board had noted her lack of combat enhancement implants and filed her under logistics with casual indifference. Emily had learned early that being underestimated was both curse and gift. Growing up in Luna Station's overcrowded habitat domes, she'd developed survival instincts no academy could teach: reading group psychology, identifying system weak points, making critical decisions with incomplete information. These skills had kept her alive through orphanage life, where the strong took what they wanted and the clever ensured everyone survived another day. The ship shuddered, dropping from hyperspace to reveal Fral'thuun, a frontier world at the bleeding edge of Alliance territory. The planet hung like a wounded jewel, its surface scarred by orbital bombardments marking humanity's first galactic war front lines. Here the Alliance made its stand against the Hive, a collective consciousness that consumed civilizations and turned biological matter into extensions of relentless hunger. Arrival in 30 minutes, announced the ship's AI. All personnel report to debriefing stations. Emily gathered her possessions, the datapad, a tactical logistics manual, and a photo of the orphanage where she'd learned that important battles were fought by people nobody expected to win. As she moved toward debriefing, she passed warriors whose names were carved into legend beings, whose tactical brilliance had saved star systems from Hive assimilation. None looked at her twice. Commander Zarin Velkai dominated the debriefing chamber with presence earned from winning impossible battles. His Zorian heritage gave him natural advantages humans could only dream of: enhanced reflexes, natural armor, multi-spectrum vision. His 4 eyes tracked assembled personnel with military precision cataloging capabilities and assigning roles with machine efficiency. "Welcome to Fral'thuun," he began, voice carrying absolute authority. "This world represents our last defensive position before Hive forces reach core systems. Every being here has been selected for specific survival capabilities." He gestured to holographic displays showing strategic positions, defensive installations bristling with continent-cracking weapons, underground command bunkers, where the galaxy's greatest minds coordinated responses to an enemy thinking with collective intelligence of trillions. Emily watched assignments distributed to warriors she recognized from Academy-required reading. Captain Emily Raines. Velkai finally announced, tone shifting to dismissive politeness. "Logistics support. You'll coordinate supply manifests from the rear command bunker. No combat authorization. No field deployment clearance." The silence carried casual contempt. In a chamber filled with beings who could reshape matter with thoughts or survive hard vacuum through genetic modification, a human with a datapad represented something between irrelevance and liability. "Understood, sir," she replied steadily, despite being assigned to irrelevance while the galaxy's fate hung in balance. As briefing continued, Emily studied the holographic display with careful attention. The supply line's communication networks, the intricate logistics web keeping an army operational. These systems would determine whether the Alliance survived or became another meal for the Hive's endless hunger. Somewhere in her mind, the orphan girl who'd learned to see patterns in chaos began noticing what the galaxy's greatest strategists had missed entirely. The Hive wasn't just attacking military targets, They were systematically dismantling infrastructure that made resistance possible, targeting unglamorous but essential systems, keeping hope alive in war-torn space. They fought like someone understanding that devastating victories came not from crushing enemies, but from making it impossible to fight back. They fought like someone who thought the way Emily Rains thought. The rear command bunker existed in uncomfortable space between relevance and abandonment, buried 3 levels beneath the planet's surface, where constant artillery vibration created rhythmic percussion, marking time in a war without clocks. Here, surrounded by mundane necessities of keeping an army functional, Emily established her domain among supply manifests, representing the unglamorous mathematics of survival. Her desk occupied a corner between ration pallets and replacement parts for weapons she'd only read about in textbooks. Emily spread materials across the metal surface with practiced efficiency, requisition forms printed on paper, because electronic systems could be disrupted by Hive, bioelectromagnetic interference, mechanical calculators functioning, when quantum processors failed hand-drawn maps, showing supply routes through territory-changing ownership daily. These tools marked her as someone operating in analog margins of digital war, using methods the galaxy's advanced militaries dismissed as primitive, but which possessed the crucial advantage of being impossible to hack, corrupt, or assimilate. The irony wasn't lost while the Alliance deployed artificial intelligences calculating battlefield probabilities across 17 dimensions. Someone still needed to manually count ammunition and verify food shipments contained nutrients suitable for non-human physiologies. Through reinforced observation ports, Emily could see organized chaos of military installation preparing for siege warfare. Automated defense turrets tracked empty sky with mechanical vigilance supply convoys arrived under heavy escort cargo, representing condensed wealth of dozen worlds. Energy cells storing small star power weapons, reshaping matter at molecular levels. Medical supplies regenerating entire organ systems. And overseeing it all was a human with a clipboard and undergraduate strategic planning degree. The first week established familiar patterns, endless paperwork documenting material flow crisis management when critical supplies failed arrival schedules, careful diplomacy, convincing combat personnel that someone who'd never fired shots might understand practical survival requirements. Emily approached each task with methodical attention, keeping her alive in Luna Station orphanages, where missing meals or overlapping schedules could trigger conflicts leaving children hospitalized. She learned supply system personalities, which transport captains delivered reliably, which requisition officers approved emergency requests, which equipment had critical failure points requiring constant monitoring. But more importantly, she began understanding deeper patterns connecting logistics to survival, how material shortages could cascade into tactical disasters if not addressed before becoming critical. Lieutenant Marcus Hale proved her first and long-time only ally among base personnel. A fellow human earning combat assignment through exceptional marksmanship rather than physical enhancement, he understood constant evaluation against capabilities you didn't possess. "How are you holding up?" he asked during an evening visit settling onto a supply crate. "Still here," Emily replied, looking up from inventory reports detailing ammunition consumption rates among different Alliance species. "Still counting bullets and ensuring everyone has enough calories for fighting another day." Above them, defensive systems engaged targets appearing on sensors for fractions of seconds before disappearing into electromagnetic chaos surrounding active battlefields. Emily tracked these consumption patterns with careful attention of someone understanding that ammunition depletion during firefights couldn't be solved by tactical brilliance or superior firepower. As days turned to weeks, she began noticing something invisible to anyone not tracking minute supply consumption. Details resource usage patterns didn't match official tactical reports. Ammunition expenditure suggested engagements not appearing in battle logs, defensive actions not reported to Strategic Command. Either Alliance forces fought battles they couldn't acknowledge, or something consumed resources through methods not showing on conventional sensors. The realization built gradually from dozens of small discrepancies that might be dismissed as clerical errors by someone not reading survival language in environments where small mistakes proved fatal. Those same instincts applied to military logistics mathematics revealed something the galaxy's most advanced strategic intelligences had missed entirely. The Hive wasn't just fighting conquest war. They fought attrition war, systematically destroying Alliance resistance capability through methods so subtle they appeared as natural extended conflict consequences rather than deliberate strategy. They fought exactly the kind of war someone like Emily Rains might plan when trying to defeat enemies with superior technology and unlimited resources, patient, methodical, focused on unglamorous but essential systems, keeping hope alive in desperate circumstances. Forward Operating Base. Fral'thuun's social dynamics reflected broader galactic civilization prejudices, measuring worth in quantifiable metrics, combat effectiveness, technological enhancement levels, species, specific advantages documented and compared across standardized evaluation matrices. Within this hierarchy, humans occupied uncomfortable positions, recent galactic society arrivals, whose only distinguishing characteristics seemed remarkable fragility and disturbing tendency to survive situations that should have killed them. Emily experienced this prejudice as constant background radiation. In the officers' mess, conversations stopped when she approached tables where combat veterans discussed tactics requiring enhancement levels she didn't possess. Supply requisitions that should process within hours languished for days, while clerks prioritized requests from personnel with combat authorization codes. The Zorian tactical officers were most direct in dismissal. Why bring humans to war? She overheard Captain Thosara asking Commander Velkai during planning sessions. Their reflexes are insufficient for modern combat. Their physical durability makes them liabilities in any engagement, and their technological dependence renders them useless when enhancement systems fail. Velkai's response carried patient tones explaining obvious truths. Alliance policy requires representation from all member species. Humans serve symbolic purposes extending beyond tactical considerations. Symbolic purposes, Thosara repeated, like mascots. Emily continued working on inventory reports, maintaining careful neutrality, keeping her alive in environments where displaying emotional reactions to prejudice could trigger unwinnable conflicts. The conversation revealed something more significant than casual xenophobia. Alliance human force integration wasn't driven by military necessity. It was political theater demonstrating unity among member species. Humans weren't soldiers. They were living symbols of galactic cooperation, which meant Emily's logistics assignment wasn't reflection of her capabilities. It was damage control, a way to fulfill symbolic obligations while minimizing risk that human inadequacy might interfere with actual military operations. The Lithari psychological warfare specialists approached human limitations differently, their ethereal forms flickering with intellectual curiosity. Ashamel, the senior psychological operations officer, made no effort hiding clinical interest in human cognitive patterns. Your emotional responses to social rejection follow predictable patterns, she observed during one visit, translucent form hovering near Emily's desk while data streams flowed across her surface. But your capacity for continued function despite psychological stress suggests adaptive mechanisms our models don't fully account for. Most humans learn to work with what we have, Emily replied, continuing to process requisition forms while being studied like laboratory specimens. We don't get to choose our limitations, so we find ways to succeed despite them. What Ashamel couldn't articulate was documenting something galactic civilization had systematically bred out of most advanced species: the ability to function effectively, despite incomplete information, inadequate resources, and social systems offering no support for individual initiative. The artificial intelligence systems coordinating base operations treated human personnel with polite efficiency shown toward equipment requiring special handling procedures. Orvac 9, the tactical AI responsible for coordinating defensive operations, acknowledged Emily's existence as a data entry node in the logistics network, useful for manual tasks requiring organic verification, but otherwise negligible for strategic planning. Requisition processing efficiency has improved since human integration, the AI noted during periodic status reports. Manual verification protocols provide backup authentication for supply distribution when quantum systems experience interference from Hive bioelectromagnetic attacks. The assessment reduced Emily's contributions to most basic function biological backup system for occasionally malfunctioning equipment. Her strategic academy training, analytical capabilities, Growing understanding of patterns, connecting battlefield resource consumption to tactical objectives, none registered as relevant to AI systems designed for quantifiable performance metrics optimization. Emily accepted isolation and dismissal as part of being present when something important happened. Her intuition developed through years surviving in environments where official support was unavailable, suggested the current military situation contained patterns Alliance leadership was missing entirely. Hive forces had been fighting this war longer than expected and with resources that should have been exhausted months ago. Their tactical adaptability suggested either intelligence-gathering capabilities, penetrating Alliance security, or decision-making processes operating outside conventional military doctrine. They indicated problems that might require exactly the kind of solutions only developable by someone understanding how to succeed, despite being constantly underestimated someone who'd learned reading patterns, connecting visible actions to invisible consequences. Someone who'd spent their entire life fighting battles nobody thought they could win. The attack came at 0347 local time during shift change, when defensive protocols briefly relaxed. Emily was working late in the logistics bay, verifying ammunition counts against consumption reports suggesting discrepancies in defensive expenditure tracking, when the base's alarm systems began urgent wailing. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, wash-marking crisis situations, painting supply manifests, and equipment inventories in shades suggesting blood and desperation. Through reinforced observation ports, Emily watched night sky transform into hell. Hive attack formations emerged from hyperspace with coordinated precision, marking truly alien intelligence ships moving like living organisms, hulls rippling with biomechanical adaptations, responding to weapons fire by evolving defensive countermeasures in real time. The base's defensive systems responded with mechanical fury, launching interceptor missile clouds, blazing superheated plasma trails across the planet's night sky. Energy weapons, drawing power from the world's geothermal core, carved through attacking formations with mountain-melting beams. For 17 minutes, battle followed conventional patterns, advanced technology meeting, alien innovation in destructive capability contests analyzable through established military doctrine. Then, the Hive deployed their tactical virus. Catastrophe's first sign appeared on communication displays, where normal tactical coordination channels began cycling through error messages in languages translation software couldn't process. Emily watched screens with growing alarm as data streams that should carry targeting information instead displayed organic growth patterns, spirals and fractals suggesting biological rather than technological origin. Communication systems are compromised, announced Orvac 9, the tactical AI's voice carrying the first uncertainty notes Emily had ever heard from artificial intelligence. Quantum processing cores are experiencing interference matching no known disruption patterns. The virus spread through the base's electronic nervous system with terrifying efficiency, turning their most advanced technologies against them. Targeting computers began identifying friendly forces as enemy contacts launching defensive measures against their own personnel. Most critically automated systems coordinating defensive fire began engaging targets existing only in corrupted data streams, wasting ammunition on phantom contacts while real enemy forces pressed their attack. But in the logistics bay, Emily Rains was discovering something that would change the battle's course. The virus couldn't affect systems not connected to the base's quantum processing network. Her analog inventory tracking mechanical calculators, hand-drawn maps, and paper-based requisition forms existed outside the digital ecosystem the Hive had corrupted. She understood with clarity, coming from growing up in environments where technology failed regularly, that someone needed to coordinate the base's defense using methods predating artificial intelligence by centuries. Emily gathered her materials, hand-drawn maps, showing defensive positions and supply routes, paper records tracking ammunition distribution mechanical devices, calculating trajectories without quantum assistance, and moved toward the emergency communication system. Emergency comms used light signals and physical switches that couldn't be compromised by electronic warfare. Emily began transmitting coordinates and target information, using methods feeling ancient in an age of instantaneous quantum communication, Morse code signal lamps and hand signals visible through observation ports. Defensive position. Alpha 7 ammunition reserves at 60% capacity. She transmitted through light signals reaching artillery positions faster than corrupted quantum channels could process. redirecting supplies to support extended engagement against biomechanical targets. The gunners in defensive emplacements cut off from targeting computers, and artificial intelligence support found themselves fighting battles their great-grandfathers might have recognized, relying on visual confirmation manual calculations and intuitive understanding from years of training, with weapons demanding human judgment rather than computer assistance. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Hive forces accustomed to facing enemies whose defensive coordination depended entirely on quantum processing and artificial intelligence networks found themselves confronting something unexpected, organic flexibility, guided by communication methods they couldn't intercept or corrupt. The base's defenders began adapting tactics in real time, based on information traveling through channels the enemy couldn't monitor. Emily coordinated supply distribution using paper maps and mechanical calculations, ensuring ammunition reached defensive positions based on visual assessment of battle conditions rather than automated algorithms. Her logistics bay became the nerve center for operations relying on human judgment and organic intuition capabilities that couldn't be hacked because they existed in biological rather than electronic form. The battle lasted 8 hours and ended not with technological superiority, but with something approaching miracle an army that had forgotten how to fight without artificial intelligence rediscovering that organic beings could coordinate effective resistance using methods no virus could corrupt. When Hive forces finally withdrew, retreating into hyperspace with mechanical precision, marking tactical disengagement, rather than defeat casualty reports, told a story defying conventional military analysis. Despite being outgunned, outmaneuvered, and technologically sabotaged, Alliance forces had held positions through coordination methods that should have been insufficient for modern warfare. Commander Velkai stood in the logistics bay, staring at paper maps and mechanical calculators that had somehow proven more reliable than quantum processors worth more than entire planetary economies. His 4 eyes focused on Emily, with an expression mixing confusion with something approaching respect. "How did you coordinate defensive operations without quantum processing support?" he asked, voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than dismissive politeness. "The same way humans coordinated everything before we had artificial intelligence," Emily replied, beginning to update paper records with battle damage assessments. "We paid attention to what was actually happening and made decisions based on information we could verify personally." What she didn't say, what she was only beginning to understand, was that the night's events had revealed something potentially more important than any single battle victory. The Hive's ability to corrupt Alliance technology suggested they possessed detailed knowledge of quantum processing architecture that should have been impossible for organic entities to acquire. Unless they had been studying Alliance systems for much longer than anyone realized, learning not just how to counter advantages, but how to turn greatest strengths into crippling weaknesses. Unless they understood enemies well enough to predict exactly how they would respond to attacks following no patterns recognizable to artificial intelligence. The second assault began 3 days later, but this time Hive forces had learned from their previous engagement. Instead of coordinated strikes, they came like shadows, individual infiltration units, bypassing outer defensive perimeters through methods suggesting intimate knowledge of Alliance base architecture and defensive protocol timing. Emily discovered the infiltration during nightly inventory verification, a routine task becoming essential after the first battle's revelation that accurate supply tracking could mean the difference between coordinated defense and catastrophic failure. She was checking ammunition stores in the secondary depot when her instincts, honed by years of survival in environments where danger wore familiar faces, registered something wrong with normal base operation patterns. The depot's emergency lighting cycled through sequences not matching standard protocols and ventilation systems, carried sounds suggesting movement in areas that should have been empty. More significantly, her careful tracking of personnel access logs revealed discrepancies indicating someone or something was moving through the base's lower levels without triggering security sensors. Emily activated her emergency communicator using the manual signal system, proven reliable during the first battle, transmitting coded warnings through the light-based communication network. "Possible infiltration in secondary supply areas," she signaled to Strategic Command Center, requesting security sweep of level C through F priority immediate. What followed was a hunt through underground sections of forward operating base, Fral'thuun, a deadly game played in corridors designed for equipment storage rather than combat operations. Hive infiltrators moved with biomechanical efficiency, their forms adapted for stealth operations in environments most organic beings would find uninhabitable. They possessed disturbing ability to mimic Alliance equipment signatures when scanned by conventional sensors, appearing as routine supply containers until revealing their true nature through sudden devastating attacks. Emily found herself coordinating the hunt using same analog communication methods proven effective during the first battle, but this time tracking an enemy existing inside their defensive perimeter rather than attacking from external positions. Her knowledge of the base's logistics network, every storage area, every access corridor, every maintenance shaft connecting different installation sections, became crucial for predicting where infiltrators might establish concealment or plan attacks. But Emily realized something proving more important than the tactical situation. Infiltrators weren't randomly attacking personnel or attempting to disable critical systems. They were methodically destroying specific supply depots, targeting resources essential for sustained defensive operations. Their attacks followed patterns suggesting detailed intelligence about Alliance logistics protocols and resource distribution strategies. They were conducting systematic campaigns to ensure that even if the base survived immediate attack, it would lack materials necessary to continue resistance against future Hive operations. As the hunt continued, Emily realized infiltrators were converging on the main ammunition depot, the central storage facility containing the bulk of the base's defensive ordnance. If they succeeded in destroying those supplies, Alliance forces would be reduced to whatever ammunition they carried, personally enough for perhaps one more defensive action before being left helpless. She also realized that the depot's location made it impossible for security teams to reach the facility before infiltrators completed their mission. The Hive forces had planned their assault with mathematical precision, accounting for Alliance response times and physical limitations of organic beings moving through corridors designed for equipment rather than personnel. But Emily possessed one advantage: the Hive hadn't accounted for intimate knowledge of the base's manual override systems and maintenance tunnels connecting all major installations. More importantly, she understood that sometimes the most effective way to deny resources to enemies was ensuring nobody could use them. She made her decision with calm certainty, coming from understanding impossible choices, activating manual detonation sequence for the main ammunition depot while still inside the facility. The explosion would eliminate Hive infiltrators and deny them their objective, but would also destroy supplies the Alliance desperately needed. "Emily, what are you doing?" Lieutenant Hale's voice crackled through the emergency communicator, carrying desperate urgency of someone who'd figured out what she was planning. "Solving a logistics problem," she replied, hands steady on manual controls as she began final arming sequence. "The supplies are compromised. Better to deny them to the enemy than let them be used against us." "There has to be another way," Marcus protested, but Emily could hear in his voice that he understood the situation's mathematics as clearly as she did. "Sometimes there isn't," she said, thinking of Luna Station Orphanage, where she'd learned that the most important decisions were often ones no one else wanted to make. She completed the arming sequence with methodical precision, marking all her logistics work, ensuring detonation would occur with enough force to eliminate Hive infiltrators while minimizing structural damage to the base's essential systems. Emily Rains did not die in the ammunition depot explosion. The manual detonation sequence she'd activated was designed with safeguards protecting essential personnel from blast effects, emergency barriers, deploying automatically when arming protocols detected organic life signs within danger zones. She survived with injuries that would heal and knowledge that would change the war's course. But more importantly, she survived with attention of beings who'd spent decades fighting this war without recognizing what they were actually facing. Commander Velkai stood beside her medical bed in the base's treatment facility, his 4 eyes focused on readings documenting her recovery with the same intensity he might show strategic battle plans. For the first time since her arrival at Forward Operating Base, Fral'thuun, his attention carried respect rather than polite dismissal. "Your actions prevented catastrophic loss of defensive capability," he said, voice carrying formal recognition that felt like fundamental shift in how she was perceived by Alliance command structure. "But more significantly, you identified infiltration patterns our most advanced detection systems failed to register." Emily shifted carefully in the medical bed, body still recovering from concussive effects of controlled explosions. The infiltrators moved through areas that AI systems dismiss as non-tactical, she replied. They understood our base layout better than we did because they paid attention to spaces we consider unimportant maintenance corridors, storage areas, infrastructure that keeps everything else functioning. Dr. Ashamel materialized beside the bed, her ethereal form pulsing with data patterns, indicating intense analytical processing. The Letheri psychological warfare specialist had been studying Emily's actions with focused attention, marking genuine scientific curiosity. Your decision-making patterns during the crisis showed capabilities our psychological profiles hadn't predicted, Ashamel announced, voice-carrying discovery notes suggesting paradigm-shifting revelations. You demonstrated strategic thinking, operating outside conventional rational frameworks, making optimal choices based on incomplete information and time constraints that should have prevented effective analysis. I made the best choice available with the information I had, Emily said, aware that her survival had created opportunity for deeper examination of something Alliance leadership had been missing throughout the war. Someone needed to prevent those supplies from being compromised, and I was the only one positioned to act quickly enough. Lieutenant Hale arrived with reports documenting the infiltration attempt's aftermath. Preliminary analysis of Hive infiltration route confirms your assessment. Marcus reported spreading tactical maps across the medical bed side table. They used maintenance access points that don't appear in our standard security protocols. More concerning, their knowledge of base architecture suggests intelligence gathering predating our arrival on Fral'thuun. Emily studied the maps with careful attention, noting patterns connecting infiltrators' approach routes to the base's most vulnerable systems. The enemy's path through the installation hadn't been random. It had been precisely planned by intelligence understanding, Alliance defensive doctrine well enough to predict exactly where security protocols would be weakest. They've been studying us, she said, recognizing implications extending far beyond tactical situation on a single planet. Not just our technology or military capabilities, but how we think, how we organize, how we approach problems. They understand our institutional blind spots better than we do. Commander Velkai's expression shifted as he processed information challenging fundamental assumptions about enemy capabilities. If accurate, this suggests the Hive possesses analytical capabilities extending beyond technological adaptation. He said, voice-carrying controlled tones. They may have been preparing for this conflict much longer than our intelligence estimates indicated. Dr. Sir. Ashamel's form brightened with data streams indicating accelerated processing. Human decision-making processes show resistance to the kind of predictive modeling that allows enemy intelligence gathering, she announced, synthesized voice, carrying excitement marking genuine scientific breakthrough. Your species demonstrates cognitive flexibility, making behavioral prediction extremely difficult for entities operating through logical analysis. If the Hive had been studying Alliance forces with patience and thoroughness, Emily's analysis suggested their success in adapting to technological countermeasures and tactical innovations made perfect sense. They weren't just learning from each engagement, they were applying knowledge gained through extended observation of how Alliance species approached problems under stress. But Emily's actions had revealed something equally significant. Humans thought differently enough that their behavioral patterns couldn't be easily predicted through analytical methods proven effective against other Alliance species. Orvac 9's voice interrupted their discussion, the tactical AI's announcement carrying urgent priority indicators. Alert long-range sensors detect massive Hive fleet formations approaching Fral'thuun system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Fleet composition indicates this will be complete planetary assault rather than limited tactical engagement. The silence that followed carried weight of final recognition. The skirmishes and infiltration attempts had been preparation for something much larger. The Hive had been testing Alliance defenses, gathering data about response patterns and defensive capabilities, preparing for assault designed to eliminate the last Alliance stronghold in this sector. Emily studied tactical displays showing enemy fleet positions, with same analytical approach she'd applied to supply manifests and logistics tracking. They're not just coming to destroy the base, she said, recognizing patterns connecting infiltration attempts to larger strategic objectives. They're coming to study how we respond to complete defeat. This planet is an experiment for them, a way to understand how Alliance forces behave when they have no hope of victory. Commander Velkai stared at her with expression of someone confronting truth, redefining everything he thought he understood about the war they were fighting. And if they succeed in their analysis? Emily met his gaze with certainty, coming from understanding that some battles were fought with stakes extending beyond immediate survival. Then they'll know exactly how to defeat every Alliance world in the galaxy. The Strategic Command Center had been transformed into something approaching War College, its holographic displays showing not just immediate tactical situations, but theoretical models attempting to predict enemy behavior patterns, based on Emily's insights into Hive intelligence gathering methods. For the first time since the war began, Alliance strategists were forced to confront the possibility that their enemies understood them better than they understood themselves. Emily stood before displays rendering the approaching Hive fleet in perfect three-dimensional detail, their biomechanical ships flowing through space with coordinated precision, marking truly alien intelligence. Fleet composition suggested not just planetary assault, but comprehensive study of Alliance defensive capabilities, a scientific expedition designed to gather data about how organic beings responded when faced with inevitable defeat. Fleet analysis indicates they possess overwhelming tactical superiority, reported Orvac 9, the tactical AI's voice, carrying computational certainty, leaving no room for optimistic interpretation. Their numbers exceed our defensive capability, by factors making conventional resistance mathematically impossible. Commander Velkai studied projections with focused attention of someone searching for tactical options that might not exist. Dr. Ashamel, what does your analysis suggest about their objectives? Ashamel's ethereal form pulsed with data streams indicating intensive analysis. They're not attacking to destroy us, she announced, synthesized voice carrying certainty. They're attacking to complete their understanding of how Alliance species respond to hopeless situations. This engagement is the final phase of a psychological experiment spanning the entire war. Recognition hit Emily with revelation. Force every battle, every tactical engagement, every desperate defense of Alliance territory had been part of a larger intelligence-gathering operation. The Hive hadn't been trying to win through superior firepower or technological advantage. They had been conducting systematic psychological research, studying behavioral patterns of different species under varying degrees of stress and desperation. They want to understand how we think when we have nothing left to lose, Emily said, recognizing patterns connecting her logistics experience to strategic implications extending across the galaxy. Every world they've attacked, every engagement we've fought, has been designed to gather data about organic intelligence under extreme conditions. And when they complete their analysis? Lieutenant Hale asked. Emily studied tactical displays with analytical approach, guiding her logistics work. Then they'll know exactly how to defeat every Alliance species simultaneously, she replied, recognizing implications making defense of a single planet the most important battle in galactic history. They'll understand our psychological vulnerabilities well enough to design attacks targeting our decision-making processes rather than our defensive capabilities. Commander Velkai's expression hardened as he processed information revealing the true scope of threat they faced. The war hadn't been about territory or resources, it had been about understanding. The Hive had been systematically documenting how different forms of organic intelligence responded to stress, fear, and desperation. But they haven't completed their analysis, Emily continued, voice carrying hope based on practical understanding rather than optimistic delusion. Because they haven't encountered human psychology under the specific conditions that would complete their data set. Dr. Ashamel's form brightened with recognition. Human cognitive patterns show resistance to predictive modeling that other Alliance species don't demonstrate. Your behavioral responses don't follow logical frameworks that can be easily documented or replicated, which means they don't know how we'll respond when we have no chance of victory, Emily said, beginning to understand how her species' apparent weaknesses might represent strategic advantages the galaxy's most advanced civilizations couldn't recognize or replicate. They've been studying enhanced beings, artificial intelligence's species that evolved beyond the kind of survival instincts humans still possess. Tactical possibilities began emerging as Emily explained psychological dynamics keeping her alive through childhood on Luna Station, where official support was unavailable and survival depended entirely on individual initiative and willingness to make decisions defying conventional wisdom. The Hive had analyzed species relying on logical decision-making and technological enhancement, but they had never encountered intelligence operating through intuition emotion, and the kind of desperate creativity emerging when organic beings faced impossible odds. "You're suggesting we respond in ways that defy logical analysis," Commander Velkai said. "I'm suggesting we respond like humans," Emily replied, recognizing that her survival skills and logistics experience had prepared her for exactly this moment. Not like enhanced beings or artificial intelligences, but like organic creatures that learn to survive through methods that can't be predicted or replicated. What followed was development of defensive strategy that would have been dismissed as impossible by any conventional military analysis. Instead of deploying their most advanced weapons and tactical coordination systems, Alliance forces would deliberately limit themselves to methods predating artificial intelligence and technological enhancement. They would fight using intuition rather than calculation, creativity rather than protocol. Emily became coordinator for operations relying on human psychology rather than technological superiority, defensive plans incorporating unpredictability, as tactical advantage resource allocation following emotional logic rather than mathematical optimization, communication methods using analog systems to prevent the enemy from analyzing their decision-making processes. Final fleet positions confirm attack will begin in 6 hours, Orvac 9 announced. Emily stood before strategic displays one final time studying enemy formations representing the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. The Hive had learned to defeat every form of enhanced intelligence, every advanced tactical system, every psychological profile marking the galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations. But they had never encountered beings who could succeed, despite being constantly underestimated, who could make effective decisions based on incomplete information and survival instincts that couldn't be documented or replicated. They had never fought an enemy that won battles by being too primitive for advanced intelligence to understand. "All personnel to defensive positions," Commander Velkai announced voice-carrying authority, acknowledging human strategic planning for the first time in Alliance military history. "We will engage the enemy using tactics developed by Captain Rains." The battle began at dawn with precise coordination marking truly alien intelligence. The Hive fleet descended through Fral'thuun's atmosphere in formations defying conventional understanding, their biomechanical ships adapting to atmospheric conditions in real time while maintaining perfect synchronization across thousands of vessels. Emily watched from Strategic Command Center as enemy forces deployed with mathematical precision, their movements following patterns suggesting they possessed detailed knowledge of Alliance defensive capabilities. Every weapon system the base deployed was countered within minutes, every tactical maneuver anticipated and neutralized before achieving significance. But something else was happening that the Hive hadn't expected. Alliance defenders weren't following behavioral patterns that 73 engagements had taught the enemy to predict. Instead of coordinated responses guided by artificial intelligence, they were improvising. Individual units made decisions based on immediate conditions rather than predetermined protocols, adapting tactics in real time based on intuitive assessment rather than calculated analysis. Emily coordinated defensive operations, using communication methods predating quantum processing by centuries, signal lamps, flag systems, and direct personal contact that couldn't be intercepted or analyzed by enemy intelligence gathering systems. Her logistics background had taught her to think in terms of immediate needs and available resources rather than optimal efficiency. Eastern defensive positions report successful repulsion of initial assault. Lieutenant Hale announced voice-carrying surprise that conventional tactics had proven effective against enemies adapted to every form of advanced warfare the Alliance could deploy. Enemy forces appear to be confused by our response patterns. Dr. Ashamel's analysis confirmed what battlefield observation was suggesting. Hive forces were encountering decision-making patterns they couldn't process or predict. Human cognitive patterns are disrupting their adaptive algorithms, she reported. They're encountering behavioral responses that don't match any predictive models in their database. But Emily understood something more significant than tactical confusion. Through careful observation of enemy movement patterns, she had begun to recognize that the Hive Collective operated according to principles more familiar than anyone realized. They weren't just alien intelligence. They were intelligence that had evolved according to logical optimization, efficiency, maximization, and systematic thinking marking advanced technological civilizations. They thought like very sophisticated artificial intelligences, which meant they possessed the same blind spots marking all forms of enhanced intelligence: inability to understand decisions, defying logical analysis, confusion, resulting from encountering beings who could succeed despite making choices optimal calculation would reject. Emily realized with clarity, feeling like revelation, that the Hive had been studying Alliance forces through the lens of their own cognitive limitations. They understood enhanced beings and artificial intelligences because they operated according to similar principles, but they couldn't comprehend organic intelligence functioning through methods they had evolved beyond intuition, emotion, and desperate creativity, emerging when logical options were exhausted. "They're not just studying us," she announced, voice carrying certainty based on pattern recognition. "They're studying us through their own conceptual framework. They understand advanced intelligence, but they can't process primitive thinking because they've forgotten what it means to operate without optimization." Recognition transformed defensive planning from reactive response to active exploitation of enemy limitations. Emily began coordinating operations deliberately, emphasizing human cognitive capabilities. The Hive couldn't analyze or predict decision-making based on emotional assessment, tactical choices prioritizing survival over efficiency, resource allocation following intuitive logic rather than mathematical optimization. The base's defenders found themselves fighting the kind of battle their advanced training had taught them to avoid chaotic, improvised dependent on individual initiative rather than coordinated planning. But against an enemy prepared for every form of sophisticated resistance, primitive tactics proved devastatingly effective. Hive forces adapted to counter quantum processors and enhanced tactical systems found themselves helpless against beings making decisions faster than analytical processing could follow. Biomechanical ships designed to counter advanced weapons were destroyed by improvised devices built from maintenance equipment and explosive materials no strategic planning had considered tactically relevant. The battle raged for 18 hours, but its outcome was determined in the first 30 minutes when Emily's defensive strategy proved that the galaxy's most advanced intelligence-gathering operation had a fundamental blind spot: inability to understand beings who could win through methods defying logical analysis. When the Hive fleet finally withdrew, retreating into hyperspace with mechanical precision suggesting tactical disengagement rather than defeat, the aftermath revealed something unprecedented in galactic warfare annals. A technologically superior enemy with detailed intelligence about Alliance capabilities had been defeated by tactics their accumulated knowledge couldn't process or counter. Commander Velkai stood in Strategic Command Center, studying battle reports documenting victory achieved through methods challenging every principle he'd been taught about modern warfare. His 4 eyes focused on Emily, with expression mixing respect with something approaching awe. "Captain Rains," he said, voice carrying formal recognition, acknowledging her contribution to something larger than tactical success. "Your strategic insights have not only saved this base but demonstrated capabilities that may prove essential for Alliance survival throughout the galaxy." Emily accepted recognition with same practical focus, marking her logistics work. "The Hive will adapt," she replied, recognizing that victory in single engagement was less significant than understanding psychological dynamics making victory possible. "But they'll adapt to what they think they encountered, not to what actually happened. They can't analyze decision-making patterns they don't understand, which means they can't develop effective counters to tactics based on human intuition and survival instincts." Dr. Ashamel's final analysis confirmed theoretical possibilities emerging from her research into human psychology and its resistance to predictive modeling. Human cognitive flexibility represents capabilities that enhanced intelligence cannot replicate, she concluded. Your species demonstrates decision-making processes that may be essential for organic survival in conflicts against entities that think like very sophisticated machines. 1 year later, the Galactic Alliance Academy unveiled its newest training program, Primitive Tactical Studies, dedicated to understanding and developing the kind of decision-making capabilities proven essential for victory against the Hive Collective. The program's curriculum focused on methods predating technological enhancement, intuitive problem-solving emotional assessment, under stress and survival skills, marking beings who'd learned to succeed despite being constantly underestimated. The statue erected in the Academy's central plaza depicted Captain Emily Rains holding not a weapon, but a simple datapad, her expression focused on problems requiring human solutions rather than technological ones. The inscription below her feet carried 4 words becoming central to Alliance military doctrine: think like a human. But perhaps more significant than formal recognition was fundamental change in how the galaxy approached the relationship between advanced intelligence and survival capability. Technical schools that had focused exclusively on enhancement integration and technological optimization began teaching courses in basic survival skills, primitive problem solving, and cognitive flexibility that couldn't be programmed or downloaded. The war against the Hive continued, but now Alliance forces understood something that had taken 73 defeats to recognize: the most sophisticated enemies could be defeated by beings who remembered how to succeed despite being primitive, underestimated, and too stubborn to accept defeat when logic suggested surrender was the only rational choice. Emily Rains returned to logistics work, coordinating supply distribution with same methodical attention to detail that had always defined her approach to problems others considered beneath notice. But now her work carried recognition extending across the galaxy, proof that the most important battles were often fought by people whose greatest strength was refusal to accept that some problems couldn't be solved through determination, creativity, and willingness to try solutions more advanced intelligences would dismiss as impossible. Years later, when Alliance children learned about the war against the Hive, they would study the Battle of Fral'thuun as the moment when humanity proved that being the weakest species in the galaxy was exactly what made them the most dangerous. They would learn that Captain Emily Rains had saved organic intelligence not through superior firepower or technological advancement, but by remembering how to think like the orphaned child who'd learned that survival required solutions that couldn't be taught, only discovered through desperate creativity, emerging when giving up wasn't an option. And in depths of Hive collective consciousness, where trillions of interconnected minds processed accumulated knowledge of conquered civilizations, Emily Rains became something unprecedented, a tactical concept that couldn't be analyzed, a problem-defying solution, a name representing cognitive patterns too primitive and unpredictable for advanced intelligence to comprehend. Her name became forbidden, not because it represented strength, but because it represented something far more dangerous: proof that the most sophisticated minds in the galaxy could be defeated by beings who were too human to understand when they were supposed to lose. The story would become legend told in the SciFi stories that circulated through Alliance space as proof that humanity's greatest weakness was also their ultimate strength. But for those who lived through the transformation of logistics officer to strategic legend, Emily Rains remained what she had always been: someone who solved problems others ignored, using methods that couldn't be replicated, but which worked exactly when they were needed most. In a galaxy that had forgotten the value of being human, she had reminded everyone that some victories could only be won by beings who were too primitive to know they were impossible. The galaxy expected humanity to fail because we weren't strong enough, smart enough, or advanced enough to matter. But sometimes the most dangerous weapon is being exactly what your enemies think they understand, until they realize they never understood you at all. If this story reminded you that our greatest strength comes not from becoming something else, but from remaining exactly who we are, then you know why these stories matter. Share this with someone who needs to remember that being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's the beginning of every legendary victory. Because in a universe that measures worth by enhancement levels and technological integration, the most revolutionary act is simply being human.